"You just stole our lake." That's what she screamed, Diane. Pritchard, president of the Willow Creek HOA, right before two patrol cars pulled up with lights flashing. I stood there on the gravel shore of Old Mill Lake, holding a folder under my arm and a sign that read, "Private Property. County Deed on File." 30 neighbors stared like I'd committed a public hanging. And in a way, maybe I had, because for the first time in 40 years, someone told them the lake wasn't theirs. When the deputy asked for documentation, I handed him 3 pages sealed in plastic sleeves. My deed, my survey, my water rights. He read them slowly, his jaw tightening a little more with each line. When he finally looked up, he said, "County confirms it's yours." You could feel the air drop out of that crowd. Diane's face went pale, her lips trembling before she hissed, "This isn't over." I wanted to believe it was, but deep down I knew that sentence was a promise. 3 days earlier, I'd been sitting in a windowless conference room at First National Bank, staring at the title paperwork. The property had been abandoned since the 80s, and the price was suspiciously low. When I asked why, the old loan officer just sighed and said, "The HOA thinks they own the lake." They don't. I bought it anyway. A 4.2-acre parcel including water rights legally clean. Or so I thought. When I visited for the first time, the place was quiet, too quiet. A moss-covered stone by the shore caught my eye, CR 48 carved deep into the granite. Beneath it, half hidden by dirt, were the words "Federal Property Transferred, 1952. Federal. My stomach sank. The banker hadn't mentioned that part. The deeper I looked, the more tangled it got. County archives confirmed that in 1948, Old Mill Lake was part of a military water reserve project, then sold to private hands in '53 with one condition: no public access unless recorded. There was no easement. There never had been. So when Diane and her HOA mob showed up accusing me of theft, I knew what I was standing on both legally and literally. Still watching 30 people glare at me like I'd burned their church was something else. They called the cops. They shouted. Someone filmed me from 10 feet away whispering, "He's stealing our lake." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the deputy's words. Look up county record, 1948. When I did, I found boxes of old documents in the county archive, letters, maps, and memos that told a story nobody wanted to admit. The HOA had been told repeatedly, 1975, 1983, 1992, 2001, that they had no claim. Every decade they'd write the county demanding public recognition. Every decade the county said no. One memo flat out said prescriptive easement claims are without merit. Continued use constitutes trespass. They knew. They'd known for decades. Then I found the smoking gun, an email from 2003, written by a man named Vernon Ashford, the HOA treasurer at the time. He'd resigned, saying, "We've been lying to homeowners. The county told us in '85 we have no legal standing, but we keep collecting fees for lake maintenance. I can't be part of this anymore." That email hit me like a gut punch. I thought about the people who'd glared at me on the shoreline, families who paid dues believing they owned this place. They were victims, too. The next morning, I installed motion-activated cameras around the property, one near the sign, one by the old stone one by the main path. 48 hours later, my phone pinged. 3 alerts. I watched, jaw clenched, as 2 hooded figures tore down my sign, threw it into the brush, and smashed the CR 48 marker with a hammer. They destroyed evidence on camera. I sent everything to the county attorney, a woman named Claire Donovan. Within hours, she called. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "you need to come in. What you've uncovered could amount to fraud." Before I could even make that appointment, Diane came back with reinforcements. I arrived at the lake to find her and 15 people installing a massive green sign. Community Lake, 40 years of public use. She stood there, arms crossed, like she was queen of the shore. "Morning, Mr. Holloway," she said. "We're exercising our rights." "Really?" I asked. "Which rights would those be?" "Prescriptive easement. Continuous use. You can't erase that with a piece of paper." I almost laughed. Prescriptive easement requires a recorded claim. State Code 184.32, look it up. Without that, you're trespassing. She glared. "We'll let the courts decide." That's when her lawyer stepped out of a black sedan. Russell Blackwell polished confident, the kind of man who believed tone could outweigh truth. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "my client believes her community has established legal rights through custom and practice." "Custom," I said quietly, "isn't law. Show me the easement." He couldn't. He knew it. And the look he gave Diane told me she hadn't told him everything. When they left, Deputy Fletcher appeared again. "You know they won't stop," he said. I know, I told him. He scribbled an address on a notepad. "Vernon Ashford. Used to be on their board. You might want to talk to him." So I did. Vernon lived 15 miles out in a small yellow house with a trimmed garden. When he opened the door, he didn't look surprised. "You must be the guy who bought the lake," he said. Inside, he poured coffee, then set a dusty accordion folder on the table. "I've been waiting 20 years for someone to ask about this." Inside were copies of board minutes, bank statements, and emails. They'd collected over $50,000 in lake maintenance fees for property they didn't own. One email from Diane herself read, "County says we have no legal standing. Recommend we ignore and continue access. Nobody will challenge us if we act like we own it." Vernon looked ashamed. "I told them it was fraud. She said the law's for people who get caught." He agreed to testify. Together, we drove to Claire Donovan's office. When she saw the folder, she said, "This just turned criminal." 3 weeks later, the county commission called a public hearing. By 6:30 p.m., the chamber was packed, 200 people, some in matching blue HOA shirts, others just curious. Reporters lined the walls. I took a seat beside Claire with my laptop and a folder full of proof. Diane sat across the room, chin high, pretending confidence. When her turn came, she played the part perfectly. "Old Mill Lake has been our heart for 40 years, she said. "Families have fished their children learned to swim there. Mr. Holloway wants to take that away." Her lawyer showed slides, photos of kids by the water, quotes about tradition. It was slick, emotional, and hollow. Then it was my turn. I walked to the microphone, plugged in my laptop, and projected the first slide, a memo from 1948. "Old Mill Lake was a federal water reserve," I said, "transferred to the county in 1952, with one condition: no public access unless recorded." Click. Next slide. 1953 deed. Private ownership. No recorded easement. Click. 1975-2001. County responses, everyone stamped. No easement exists. Click. Diane's own email. Recommend we ignore and continue access. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, someone shouting, "She knew." Vernon stood next to me, his hands shaking. "Everything he's shown you is true," he said into the mic. "We knew we didn't own that lake. Diane told us to keep collecting fees. I quit because I couldn't live with it." Diane shot up red-faced. "You're going to believe them over an entire community." Commissioner Vaughn leaned forward. "We're going to believe documented evidence. Do you have a recorded easement, yes or no?" Silence. Then Russell spoke quietly. "We do not." 5 votes later, the gavel came down. Old Mill Lake is private property. The HOA has no claim. Reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. Claire turned to me and whispered, "You just ended a 40-year lie." The next morning, the headline read, "HOA Fraud Exposed. 20 years of illegal lake access." The sheriff opened a criminal investigation. Diane was removed as president within a week. Their accounts were frozen. Residents demanded refunds for decades of fake lake maintenance fees. Russell publicly withdrew as their attorney, saying he'd been misled. For the first time, it was quiet at Old Mill Lake. No trespassers, no shouting, just water and wind. A month later, the county offered a compromise, an official recorded easement for public access managed by the county, not the HOA. I signed it. For the first time in 70 years, the lake's status was clear private property with public access legally recorded. The day they installed the new gate, Vernon stood beside me. Families walked in fishing poles and picnic baskets in hand. Diane was gone. The new HOA issued an apology. Vernon looked at the water and said softly, "Sometimes the only way to fix something is to break it open." I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "Justice isn't about winning, it's about silence after the noise." And that silence finally felt right.